Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are moving on to episode 2 of my Finding My Letterboxd 4 series.
Oi! 4 favourite films.
I always shy away from it because, like, oh, do I have to mention Kurosawa so people think I'm interesting?
Yeah, I know. Can I
But,
say
like,
Back to the Future?
Yes, you can.
I mean, they're always changing. I was just gonna say, I wish I had a book to like write down all the films I've seen. Then
That's
I was...
Letterboxd.
And if you haven't seen the first episode in this series, it is on Get Out. I'll put a link to the video in the description. I'll also just create like a playlist for all of these videos. But if you didn't see that one, just to give you a kind of an idea or a rundown of what this series is, right here on the screen, I'm going to put my Letterboxd 4. These are the movies that I've put in my Letterboxd 4 favorites, and it's, you know, again, I like all of these movies, obviously, and these are what if you ask me, these are what I would say are my 4 favorite movies. It just feels a little weird doing these because I have Get Out plus my 3 favorite movies of 2019, and so I feel like through this series I want to kind of go back and rewatch some movies that maybe I haven't seen in a while, that I know that I love, and just kind of figure out exactly what is my true Letterboxd 4, if you will, or is it the whole point of this is to find out that maybe I don't have necessarily a true Letterboxd 4 as much as it's just kind of whatever movie I've seen the most recent kind of just like fits into that 3 or 4 slot. So that's the point of this series. We'll give it a shot and find out. What I'm doing though to start this series is we're going through each of those 4 films first that are in that Letterboxd 4 and just giving a little bit of a review. So without further ado, let's just jump straight into the review of today's episode, which is
My Little Women.
Four sisters come of age in America in the aftermath of the Civil War. The film stars Saoirse Ronan as Jo March, Florence Pugh as Amy March, Timothée Chalamet as Theodore Lawrence, Emma Watson as Meg March, and Laura Dern as Marmee March. Little Women is an adaptation of the Louisa May Alcott novel of the same name. The film was released in 2019 and was directed by Greta Gerwig. The film is rated PG for thematic elements and brief smoking. Jacqueline Durran won an Oscar for Best Costume Design at the 2020 Academy Awards. Little Women was also nominated for Best Picture, Best Actress for Saoirse Ronan, Best Supporting Actress for Florence Pugh, Best Adapted Screenplay, and Best Original Score. Alright, and then before we get into the real review, I do want to say one quick thing. If you saw my Get Out video, the first episode, I did mention in there, right at this point, that there was like a spoiler section at the end, where, I was kind of talking about some of the more, the twists kind of that film that I didn't want to spoil for anyone that hasn't seen it. I'm not going to do a spoiler section in this video, because, it's not as... Obviously, I think a lot of people are pretty familiar with Little Women just as either the story from the book or from any of the previous adaptations of the film. So I'm not going to do like any spoiler section necessarily, but there is one element about one of the characters that I'm kind of going to talk a little bit about. I'm obviously not going to say exactly what it is, but if you want absolutely no spoilers, again, the entire point of this series is I'm just giving you my 5 out of 5 star movies, so these are the movies that I love. So obviously I recommend you go see this if you haven't and you don't want any sort of slight spoiler for, something that happens, in the third act of this movie. But I'm not going to say exactly what it is, but just a little warning that there is going to be a little bit of discussion and some clips that I'll put in this video that are maybe slight spoiler warnings, but we're not going to do a whole spoiler section like we did in the Get Out video. So then just to start this review, the first thing that I want to talk about is the acting. And first you got to start off with Saoirse Ronan. She is really, the star of this movie for me. And I had seen, at this point, I had seen Lady Bird, also, Greta Gerwig and Saoirse Ronan, which honestly is a film that might find its way into this series. But I loved Saoirse Ronan in that. I think that movie I kind of was like, oh, she's a good actor. And I think I had seen some other things that she had been in, but this was the movie that has just absolutely made me fall in love with Saoirse Ronan, to the point that she is my favorite actress working right now. I absolutely, I will watch everything that she does. What was the... I'm trying to blank on the name of the movie she did last year with Paul Mescal. Foe, I think is the name of that movie. Like I was eager to seek that out. I was super excited for it. A lot of people kind of hated that movie. I didn't necessarily love it, but I think I enjoyed it way better than a lot of people. And I think part of it is because just of how much I love Saoirse Ronan, and that love really comes from this movie. Like she is just phenomenal in this movie.
I just feel like women, they have minds and they have souls as well as just hearts, and they've got ambition and they've got talent as well as just beauty. And I'm so sick of people saying that love is just all a woman is fit for. I'm so sick of it. But I'm so lonely.
So I mentioned in the kind of the intro to the film section of this video, I mentioned that the only Oscar that Little Women won, despite I think it was nominated for 5, maybe it was 6 that I just read, but it was 5 or 6. It was nominated for a good handful, but the only Oscar that it won was for costume design, which sure, valid, you know, it was a deserving award, but you cannot like tell me that Saoirse Ronan absolutely should not have won Best Actress that year for Little Women. And I actually have the 2020 Best Actress lineup pulled up right here, and so we're just going to go over it real quick. The winner was Renee Zellweger for Judy. Then also nominated with her was Charlize Theron for Bombshell, Cynthia Erivo for Harriet, and then Scarlett Johansson for Marriage Story. 4 great, all great performances. Zellweger ended up being, the winner for Judy, a film that I think a lot of people didn't see. The 2020 Oscars was the first Oscars that I was like really invested in. That was, I think, the previous year, the 2019 Oscars was the first one that I ever really watched live, and then 2020 was the first one that like I had seen every single film before the Oscars to like actually be able to like say that I've seen all of these and know what's happening during the Oscars. And Judy was one of those films, biopic on Judy Garland. It is one of those films that I did not know of its existence if it wasn't for me doing the watching every single movie and prep for the Oscars. And again, that's not to take away how good Renee Zellweger was in that movie, because she is good, but I think there's like a different level of Saoirse Ronan, I think, again, was just better. And then also in the movie that a lot of more people had seen, it was the Best Picture nominee out of, I guess Marriage Story was nominated for Best Picture that year with Scarlett Johansson, which I think Scarlett Johansson was kind of like the runner-up in this race. I think, actually, if I remember this whole year right, Renee Zellweger won everything. Like, she won BAFTA, SAG, Critics' Choice, Golden Globe. Like, she swept everything. So it's hard to say that Scarlett Johansson was probably the runner-up. Honestly, maybe it could have been Saoirse Ronan, but it's just one of those that I'm like, in the moment, because it was like my first Oscars, I remember kind of watching it thinking like, oh, I guess this just, because Saoirse Ronan's young, they just don't do this. They don't give it to the, these performances, even though like I felt like it was so much better. And it just, I don't know, it's just a weird, looking back at it now, it makes even less sense. Like, Saoirse Ronan, again, absolutely 100% should be an Oscar winner for this, and Saoirse Ronan will at some point in her life, win an Oscar. I really wish it was for this performance, because that clip that I just played, the I'm So Lonely clip from Saoirse Ronan, every time I watch this movie, it doesn't matter how many times I see it, I tear up at that line every time. It hits me so hard every single time I watch this movie, and that's just something that like that's what you should be winning Oscars for. You should be winning for these performances that if you've seen a movie 10 plus times, you're still emotional when you hit to those certain beats. And again, that's just the performance that Saoirse Ronan delivered. And while we're talking about Saoirse Ronan, let's jump to the other Oscar-nominated actress in this film, which was Florence Pugh. She was nominated for Best Supporting Actress, and she also just did, a phenomenal job in this film. She is the one that kind of has, I don't want to say the hardest task, in the sense that, she's playing the youngest of the sisters, and so it's definitely, how do I want to say this? During the flashback scenes, because the part of this story, and I'll get to this a little bit later as well, but the story is kind of split up into 2 different timelines. So during those, the flashback scenes when she's supposed to be really young, she is clearly too old to be the character, and they just kind of throw like the bangs on her, to have it pretend like she's younger, and even though she is clearly too old, she still does a phenomenal job of doing that. And I love that they made that decision of not recasting Amy with Florence Pugh's character with like another, like a younger actress in those scenes, and just letting Florence Pugh do it, because again, it's clearly that she's too old, but that's, we can go to a movie and we can kind of, envision, and we can like pretend, and we can watch it and be like, oh no, yeah, this is like a little, I don't know how old she's supposed to be in the flashback scenes, like, I mean, under 10 probably, maybe like 10 to 12, maybe in that range, but obviously you can tell she's the younger child, like, in the family. But she does a great job of really portraying and giving off kind of the younger sister, kind of the I don't know what the word I'm looking for. Not necessarily like spoiled, but like the entitled, or kind of just like the bratty kind of younger sister, if you will. Like, she does a great job of playing that, and then also playing, when in the present day scenes when she's older, really kind of playing that this, you can feel just the bond that all of the sisters have with each other. Again, so Florence Pugh was just incredible in this film.
I'm not a poet. I'm just a woman. And as a woman, there's no way for me to make my own money. Not enough to earn a living or to support my family. And if I had my own money, which I don't, that money would belong to my husband the moment we got married. And if we had children, they would be his, not mine. They would be his property. So don't sit there and tell me that marriage isn't an economic proposition, because it is. It may not be for you, but it most certainly is for me.
And then there's a couple other actors that I want to go over really quickly as well that all, were phenomenal in this film. The first one being Timothée Chalamet.
Teddy, I don't believe I will ever marry. I'm happy as I am, and I love my liberty too well to be in any hurry to give it up.
I think you're wrong about that, Joe.
No.
I think you will marry, Joe. I think you'll find someone and love them, and you will live and die for them, because that's your way, and you will. And I'll watch.
Timothée Chalamet, his performance in this is so interesting in the sense that, like, for me, Saoirse Ronan, it was always good, right? I watched it and I was like, oh, was always good. Florence Pugh was always good. All the other actors, it was like from the very first watch, I was like, these are great performances. Timothée Chalamet, his role in this, the first couple times I watched it, I was kind of like, oh, he's just, Laurie, like, he's just the boy next door. He's just kind of the one kind of male character that around the same age as the sisters, or at least the one that gets the majority of the screen time compared to the other boys. And I kind of like didn't necessarily always, I don't want to say, it's not like I ever hated the performance. It's just, if I was listing all of the best performances in this movie, I don't think I ever would have mentioned Timothée Chalamet's, but his was the last couple times. I don't know if this is one of those things that just kind of the Chalamet essence, if you will, of the last couple of years, between the Dunes and then Wonka, and just the different things that he's been able to do, that maybe I just like have warmed up more to Timothée Chalamet. I don't know necessarily if that's what it was, but it was something about the last watch where the clip that I just played, the "and I'll watch" scene that he gives. It hit so much harder this time, where I was like looking at him as, the first couple times seeing this, is just seeing him as the boy that's chasing the girl, like that's all he is, and now all of a sudden this time in that line, especially that line delivery, it kind of hitting of, oh no, this is like a full character with, his feelings are just as important, as Joe's, in the way that, of how he's really, how he is so in love and and romantically pursuing her, and he can't understand what's going on, why Joe doesn't feel the same way. And it was something about just his line delivery in that scene this time specifically that just hit so much harder. And then obviously he gets some of the scenes with at the end with Amy, where he's kind of a little more not just all after Joe, and especially the kind of the scene at the end where they're the dinner with Joe's friend that comes over. Again, I didn't want to say give too many spoilers, but just kind of like the way that all of a sudden his relationship to where he is with the sisters and with Joe specifically, that how that relationship is kind of changed, and all of a sudden it's just like it felt like much more complete of a performance than I feel like I remember, and I just was in love with his performance so much more than I remember being before. The next actress that I want to give a quick little shout out and talk a little bit about is Laura Dern.
Do you love it?
If he asked me again, I think I would say yes. Do you think he'll ask me again?
But do you love him?
I care more to be loved. I want to be loved.
That is not the same as loving.
I know.
Now, Laura Dern, she was one that, I mean, because she's the one that gets a lot of the scenes from Joe that I love the most from Saoirse Ronan. Those scenes, and the reason I love them so much, she's always bouncing, for the most part, and almost every scene that I love so much of from Saoirse, she's bouncing off of Laura Dern's character. She's bouncing off of Marmee, and so that's like, I've always kind of really had a soft spot for Laura Dern in this movie, and if you can believe it, Laura Dern actually did win an Oscar in this category, the Best Supporting Actress category, this year, and it wasn't for Little Women. She won the Oscar for Marriage Story, Best Supporting Actress. Now, I've only seen Marriage Story the one time. It's one of those, I remember really, I liked it. I don't know if it was necessarily one of those that was just, like, too painful that I just haven't, like, cared to go back and watch. To be fair, I have not watched it since then, but it's another one of those where it's like, you know, 5 years removed? 5 years from these movies, 4 years from this Oscar ceremony removed, that looking back at it now, all these years later, it seems crazy to me to think that that was the movie that she was getting nominated for. And again, so much of this is just because of my love for Little Women, but it's like this... it's hard for me to like watch this film, see that performance, know that she won an Oscar this year, and that was not the role that she won the Oscar for. She is the perfect, like, the loving mother that is, you know, so kind, you know, and going and, you know, delivering the breakfast and loving her husband and who, you know, is away in the war, but also while being home and taking care of her daughters. Like, it's just the perfect mother role. And, you know, I just love Laura Dern so much in this movie. And then the next actress I want to talk a little bit briefly about is Emma Watson.
I want to get married.
Why?
Because I love him.
You will be bored of him in 2 years, and we will be interesting forever.
Just because my dreams are different than yours doesn't mean they're unimportant. I want a home and a family, and I'm willing to work and struggle, but I want to do it with John.
For me in this movie, I haven't seen, you know, the any of the other adaptations, or I haven't read the book, so I don't necessarily know if this is just kind of her character thing, if it's kind of based, you know, everything, or if it's just kind of this one movie. But I feel like she is kind of the one sister that gets a little less to do. She's kind of I don't want to say the least important, but being the eldest sister, she's, you know, kind of married off first, and then we're kind of following Joe and kind of the younger sisters a little bit more, and so she isn't always there, but when Emma Watson is on screen, she does a phenomenal job of, again, she's very similar to Marmee in the sense of she is very, like, the motherly, the eldest sister, loves her little sisters, is very kind of gentle and soft-spoken, and she does an excellent job of nailing that. And honestly, she does a phenomenal job of, there's so many actors, child actors specifically, that when their breakout is one specific role over 8 films, like, they're so locked in to that role, you know. So obviously with her is Hermione Granger, but I don't gotta spend a second thinking of her as that. She is Meg March. Like, that is who she is in this film, and she does a phenomenal job of really making this character her own. And even though she doesn't have as many impactful scenes for me as the rest of the sisters do, she is still just phenomenal in this. And then the last bit of actors that I want to talk about, it's actually kind of a 1-2 punch here. I want to talk about both Eliza Scanlen and Chris Cooper together. Obviously Beth, the second youngest sister, and then Mr. Lawrence is, you know, from Chris Cooper.
It occurred to me today that my daughter's piano suffers from want of use.
Any of your girls like to run over and practice on it now and then? Just to keep it in tune. If they don't care to come, well then, never mind.
Oh, sir, they do care. Very, very much.
You're the musical girl, huh?
I love it dearly, and I'll come if you are quite sure nobody will hear me and be disturbed.
Not a soul, my dear.
Their chemistry together. Like, that's one of the biggest things that I love about this film, and what I love about the acting the most, which is why I kind of wanted to start with the acting as kind of the highlight for me in this film, is the chemistry all of the actresses, all the sisters have with each other is beautiful. The chemistry that they all kind of have with, because I mean, at some point they all kind of interact with Laurie. That, you know, it's that chemistry is beautiful. But for me, I think kind of the underappreciated, or just kind of it's because it's only a couple scenes, I don't want to necessarily say that it's like subtle, but it's like, it's just not the most important of relationships in terms of like the grand scheme probably of the story, but it is the relationship that Beth and Mr. Lawrence have together that is so, to me, just so heartwarming. And it's one of the scenes that it's like, it's really the clip that I just showed really is kind of the first scene that really makes you, because you know, Beth, I talk about Meg not having a whole lot to do. Beth, at certain points in the script, is kind of the forgotten sister, it feels like, at times, where she doesn't have as much to do. But she gets a couple scenes and she just knocks them out of the park. And this is the first one for me that makes me really just kind of fall in love with her as a character, and makes you just care so much for her as a person, which is, you know, obviously why her story is what really kind of hits you as the film goes on. And then it really is just, again, Mr. Lawrence, he's only in a couple scenes here and there, but really the connection that he has, you know, a little bit with some of the other sisters and with Laura Dern, with Marmie's character, you know, it's all good, but it really is, it's just his chemistry with Eliza Scanlen, with Beth's character, that it really just, it hits hard. And then moving on from the acting, the next thing that I want to talk about is really, honestly, I could have let off with this, because this is the star. This is the what makes this film go, and it is Greta Gerwig. It's both her direction and her script that she has compiled here. It has crafted for this movie. And I talked about a little bit earlier that there was the multiple timelines, and we were going to get back to it. This is where I want to start with the timeline thing, because I remember seeing this film. Was probably opening weekend. It was probably, I guess for me, I would see a lot of movies on Tuesdays, so the Tuesday after it came out, and I'm pretty good at, like, I don't read reviews, I don't look at anything until I see the movie, and then I'll devour every sort of, like, review or content or what my friends are saying about movies, you know, after the fact. But I didn't know anything going into it. I went into the movie, obviously there's kind of the split timelines, and maybe the first or second time that it kind of jumps the timelines, maybe it's a little confusing, but it's like, pretty quickly after that, I was not confused at all. It all makes perfect sense. It's really easy to tell what timeline you're in. Obviously, I mean, the easiest way was kind of based on the hairstyles for a couple of the characters. Jo, whether she has her shorter hair, and with Amy, whether she has the bangs, and then also it's just easy to tell what timeline you're in based off of like where the characters are, because obviously Jo kind of moves away and then comes back, and I mean, it just, for me, it was not confusing at all. And then I remember after seeing this movie being just in love with it, and then kind of seeing reviews, and so many people were criticizing the film for the confusing timelines, and that's just something that, like, I just never have understood how the timelines are confusing. And again, I haven't seen any of the previous adaptations, and I haven't read the book, so I don't know. I'm assuming it's not like this in that, but I love the decision she made to do the multiple timelines, because they work together so beautifully.
The way the book was written, it was written in 2 books. In the first book, which is the childhood part, which is what I think people think of when they think of Little Women, and then the second book is the adult part, 8 years later. And they're really twins, and they're companions. And I found, as I started looking at the chapters, that you could graft them almost one on top of the other, and they're like the adult answer to what had happened in childhood. And I thought there was just something incredibly poignant about it.
I mean, just kind of talking about the script a little bit, it's just such a beautiful film in the sense that there are so many heartwarming scenes, as well as heartbreaking scenes, just some really sad scenes. And I think for me, that is like a complete movie. If you can, like, break me, if you can, you put in some heartbreak, if you put in some sad or tragic things, and that gets me as emotional or hurts, makes me feel as much as the heartwarming scenes. And I think that's, for me, there's a lot of films that are just, would be considered kind of heartwarming. And I think it's I guess maybe it's the blend of how heartwarming is something before you're just calling it over the top and like cheesy or whatever. And at no point is this ever that, because I think the tragedy, and as well as the the happy scenes that are going on in this movie, I think they all work so well together. And again, that's from Greta Gerwig's script, putting that all together like that to make you feel, again, just the big swings of emotion and feel them all so fully. I think it's just a script, an excellent script. And then the last thing that I want to kind of talk about here, and this is kind of, I guess, a little bit of the script, but also I guess the the direction or just the vision that Greta Gerwig had, is all of these characters. They're all so full of depth, and they're all so full of characterization, and something that, in a film like this where there's so many different characters, because that's one thing that each time I watch this, I'm almost like, it's not that I forget that there's so many characters, but it's like, every time I watch it, I'm always like, oh yeah, like there are so many different characters in this that all have so many scenes and they all shine. And because you've got all the sisters, you've got, I haven't even talked about Meryl Streep yet. You got the aunt, you got the parents, you got the neighbors, you've got the teachers, you've got the publisher that that Tracy Letts' character that Saoirse Ronan's meeting with. Like, you just have so many different characters, and they all play such a big part in this film that you almost just kind of, like, it's just such an amazing job of giving so many characters, but they're all so full of characterization, they're all full of depth, and they all bring something to the table. And especially in, as far as like the sisters, especially, everyone else, I mean honestly, I could throw, probably will throw Laurie into this category. Just a lot of the main characters, not only are they just so full of depth and they're full of characterization, but they all have very clear character flaws, and it's something that they're all kind of a weakness for them that they all kind of have to deal with. Obviously with Jo, she mentions it a couple times, like with her anger being kind of the the thing for her. Laurie, he's kind of inconsiderate, kind of a jerk at times, especially to Meg and to Amy's characters. He's a little mean to them sometimes. Not super mean to Jo, obviously, because he's in love with her, but he is a little bit inconsiderate to the other sisters. Amy, obviously for her, it's a little bit of the jealousy, that she's so jealous of Jo. She's jealous of the older sister and all that she gets to do. I guess jealous of Meg as well, when they get, she gets to go to the dancing. For Meg specifically, she's kind of got envious, like she's very, wants that dress, she wants, things that she can't have, she wants this better life, and so sometimes she forgets how grateful she is for the life she has. And so it's one of those things where it's just all of the main characters, they all have their little bit of flaws. And honestly, and I think that's where you get Beth. I believe the quote from Meg, as she says, that Beth is the best of us. And honestly, that's what I think makes Beth's character so even more heartwarming and such a beautiful character, and ultimately kind of just a real emotional piece of this story, is because of how there's all these different flaws, and she really was kind of the one that goes and, after Marmee goes away, she goes and visits the family with the sick kids. Like, she's still going out there and being like her mom, being that character that is just so full of like love and life. And so it's just one of those things with each of the characters all kind of having their flaws, and then Beth kind of being referred to as the best of us. It really is just, all of these characters are so full of life, and really just makes for so many stories. I think so many movies I see, it just kind of, they fall flat at times just because the characters aren't giving you a whole ton. It's the story just kind of feels flat because you don't enjoy always watching these characters. With this film, you love every single character that's on screen, and that's an excellent job of, from the script's perspective, but also Greta Gerwig, her direction of getting these performances out of all of these actors. And then, like I said, I wanted to get back to the multiple timelines thing again one more time. I think that another highlight of this film that is highlighted with the multiple timelines is the editing. it's not like every single time that you get to watch a movie that you can kind of like point out or highlight that the editing was a standout or a highlight of the film. It's kind of one of those things that ultimately I think we kind of take for granted in a lot of movies because it's one of the hidden or kind of the I guess like less discussed or kind of the underappreciated elements of filmmaking, because it's, obviously you notice the production design, you notice this, you notice everything else that is very flashy and is like out there. The editing, the whole point of the editing is that if it's done well, it's supposed to be kind of, you almost don't notice it, or that it's seamless, or it just feels natural. And so it's like the editing isn't something that I think gets a lot of appreciation, but for this film, for Little Women specifically, I do want to give a shout out to that editing. And just to, almost just kind of further my point, I had to stop for a second and actually look up the name Nick Houy, I think is how you pronounce his name, that he is the editor of this film. Just kind of goes to show you how, I guess, underappreciated the whole art of editing a film really is, because it's not, you don't know a lot of editors' names off the top of your heads, but I'm like looking at it now, I'm realizing it looks like he's kind of been an editor for a lot of Greta Gerwig's films, so he's obviously great at what he does, and so I think that he deserves a little bit of a shout out here and a little bit of the appreciation here, because so much of what works again for Little Women, what works for this story, and why the whole multiple timelines thing works really well is because of how well it's edited. Obviously this story could have been told in a linear sense, and I'm sure that it still hits hard, and I'm sure some of the emotional moments are still in the right spots, but being able to tell it into two different timelines, it really works in a sense where kind of the big emotional moments of both stories are kind of happening together, and it really is just creating this full beautiful picture. And so it's another one of those things where if the movie is firing on all cylinders to the point that the editing becomes a big standout, like that's how you know you have an excellent film on your hands. And then the last thing that I want to give a shout out to is the score of this film. Alexandre Desplat, the composer of this film, has put together, this is up there for me. This is maybe my all-time favorite score, I might say. Like, it is that good. It is up there. I absolutely just love this how peaceful and beautiful this score is. I would recommend, if you don't kind of remember the score of this film, to just kind of look up on YouTube and just listen to some of the pieces in this film, because it's one of those things that music is obviously, I think a lot of people sometimes consider music as kind of like a cheat for getting like emotion out of you, because it's easy to be moved by music, and the music in this film, it moves me, and it is just very beautiful. So I love the score for this. There's actually, it's been a couple years, but there was a time in my life where, honestly, one of my dream jobs, one of my dream goals in life is to like write movie scripts. Like, that's something that I am passionate, and like I love the idea of being able to do that, and that's something that that I would like to do. And so years ago I used to actually kind of write a little bit, wrote a rough first draft of a movie, but and honestly, whenever I was writing, this was actually, I would just kind of throw some music or throw something on in the background. This score was like my favorite score, that piece of music to just write to. Again, it's just very beautiful. It's peaceful. So again, if you're not familiar with the score, it's been a while since you've seen this movie and you don't remember the score, I highly recommend just going back and watching it, listening to it on YouTube, because it really is just beautiful. And then the final couple things they want to do in each of these episodes in this series is obviously the rating. This is staying a 5 out of 5 star movie. It's one of those films that I wish, it's this and Get Out are the ones I would give like 6 out of 5s. Like, they're so good that they get better with every additional watch, and I already am considering them perfect films. And so it's like, you already have a perfect film that is somehow getting even better and better every single time. So I really just love this film. And then the next question is it staying in the Letterboxd 4? For me, this is a yes. I think this is just about as locked as Get Out is. So as long as I'm keeping my Letterboxd 4, again, I mentioned this last video, I'll probably do this maybe starting next year, where I'll kind of mix up my Letterboxd 4 in a sense based off of what time of year it is, depending on the month, kind of mix it up a little bit. But as long as I'm doing my true, real Letterboxd 4 favorite films, this is just like neck and neck with Get Out. Like, these are my 2 favorite films of all time, so this will always have a spot there in that Letterboxd 4. And that's it. Thank you for watching this video. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, I haven't seen any of the other adaptations of Little Women, nor have I read the book. So if you have seen any other adaptations, or if you are a big fan of the book, let me know, and let me know if that's something that I should do, if I should check those out. I've heard a lot of great things about, I think it's the 90s Little Women, and the one with Christian Bale as Laurie, and I'm drawing a blank on who the actors who are playing the sisters. So yeah, I mean that's the one specifically I'm most interested in seeing. So let me know if that the 90s. I think it's the 90s. I should have looked this up. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, let me know if that version is good, or honestly any of the adaptations. And I would love to, just because of how much I love this film, I would love to really check any of those out, as well as the book as well, if it is a great read. So yeah, just let me know your thoughts on those, and then I will let you know that the next episode in this series is going to be Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which I'm sure if you saw my last video, the watching movies, or ranking the movies that I watched in the month of June, you could have guessed that that's the next one that's coming up, since I watched it last month. But hopefully in the next couple weeks here, I will get to that Portrait of a Lady on Fire video for you, another one that I'm really excited to talk about. So that's it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to like the video and subscribe to the channel, I would greatly appreciate it. So thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.